In 1480 in Romania, Prince Vlad is happily married to Elizabeta. As a sign of their love, Vlad gifts Elizabeta a small music box. One day, their dirty time is interrupted by the knights, who drag Vlad away because they need him in battle. The country is at war, and since the enemy is closing in, Vlad orders his men to take Elizabeta to another castle for safety. Before leaving, Vlad is blessed by the Pope and asks for holy protection for his wife. In the forest, Elizabeta is being escorted to the new location. Unfortunately, an enemy soldier is hiding in the trees, and he immediately brings down 2 guards with quick arrow shots. The other guards prepare to fight and make Elizabeta ride ahead. Outside the woods, Vlad breaks a bunch of oil barrels to start a fire that acts as a line to keep the enemy army contained. A fierce battle begins, and soon men from both sides are dying all over the place, but Vlad's army clearly has the advantage. With great skill and teamwork, they work hard to win the fight. Moments later, Vlad and his army appear in front of the enemy king with all their opponents' heads impaled on their spears. The moment is interrupted by Vlad being informed of the attack on his wife, so he leaves to find her. Meanwhile, Elizabeta is riding as fast as she can while enemy soldiers chase after her. This area is known as the Forest of Wolves, and thousands of bear traps are hidden under the snow. 2 soldiers are brought down by these traps while Elizabeta does well dodging them. Sadly, her horse eventually gets caught in a trap too, and she falls, which allows the enemies to surround her while carefully testing for traps with their swords. Elizabeta tries to move away only to step on a trap too. When Vlad arrives, his horse is also brought down by a bear trap. He continues on foot, and soon he's fighting 2 enemy soldiers, quickly bringing them down. Vlad throws his sword to kill the man approaching Elizabeta, and the sword accidentally stabs her too. A crying Vlad cradles Elizabeta in his arms as she dies. Sometime later, Vlad visits the Pope again and rants against God for not protecting his wife, even though Vlad has been doing lots of killing in his name. He wants Elizabeta back and asks for a miracle that the Pope can't provide. Furious, Vlad kills the Pope with a crucifix and says he won't follow God anymore unless Elizabeta is brought back. Suddenly the wind picks up in the room and the Jesus statue starts crying, but Vlad looks proud. His terrified men have to drag him away from the church. 400 years later in France, a priest visits a psychiatric clinic to talk to Dr. Dumont, who says that he has a very delicate case that even worries the Queen of England. The men then walk through the corridors of the clinic, where dozens of crazy people are misbehaving and doctors harshly drag them around. Eventually they cross a steel door that takes them down a tunnel to a sealed room where Maria is being kept in chains. She's an Italian woman who is engaged to the Queen's great-nephew, and since she objected to a church, the wedding was held on the family estate. However, the groom brought a bishop to bless the union, and seeing him filled Maria with hysteria. The records say she was born in 1759, which is impossible because it'd mean she's 130 years old. Her age and her allergy to God make them wonder if she's a creature of the devil. While the men discuss the case, Maria wakes up and hisses at them. The priest takes a closer look and notices her fangs, so he concludes she's a vampire. He explains she's the first one to be captured alive and that vampires can go out in the light, it's just direct rays they can't take. To prove it, he opens the window and the sun immediately burns her skin. When the priest holds up a crucifix in front of her face, it catches on fire. Then he cuts the finger of Dumont's assistant Simon and drops a few drops of blood in Maria's mouth to get her to cooperate. The priest checks her neck and finds the bite marks that transformed her into a vampire. He explains the church has been fighting vampires for centuries, but they still haven't found the one that started it all. Desperate for more blood, Maria mentions that the first vampire is her master. He's a prince who will soon come to the city to look for his princess. Meanwhile, notary Jonathan is traveling through a forest at night. The driver suddenly stops the coach and says he can't go any further because the wolves will soon come out, so he leaves Jonathan with his luggage, a torch, and a crucifix. Jonathan finishes his journey on foot while keeping the wolves at bay with the torch. Eventually he makes it to a big castle, and when he crosses the entrance, the gate automatically closes behind him. Another door opens and closes on its own, allowing Jonathan to enter a room where a person is waiting on the balcony only to disappear in a flash of lightning. Suddenly Jonathan is startled by an old man appearing behind him. The man throws the torch away and turns on the lights before introducing himself as Prince Vlad, also known as Count Dracula. The men sit at the table and Jonathan is happy to eat the delicious food, but Dracula doesn't have any. With a wave of his hand, Dracula sends a plate towards Jonathan, who thinks it's just a trick. Then Jonathan searches for some paperwork in his bag, and while he's distracted, Dracula kills a rat with a fork. He crushes it with his bare hand to pour its blood into his cup and drink it. Jonathan explains that the county he represents is interested in buying an old abbey in Paris that belongs to Dracula, hoping to transform it into a hospital. While taking out more paperwork, Jonathan accidentally drops the crucifix. When Dracula asks him if he's a believer, Jonathan says no and shares that the coach gave it to him. With another flick of his hand, Dracula tosses the crucifix into the fire and startles Jonathan by appearing by his side, saying it's time for bed. After Jonathan is taken to his chambers, Dracula asks him not to leave the room during the night. Then Dracula returns to the dining room and plays some music before telling a gargoyle to watch him. Jonathan finds a book in the room and takes a look at the text explaining the history of the castle. There's a drawing of young Vlad, but the prince's portrait is missing. Meanwhile, the priest visits Maria's fiancé Henry and tells him that Maria is healthy, but they're still working on removing the evil from her. The priest then searches Maria's room for more clues. Among her things, he finds the missing book page with Elisabetta's portrait. In the middle of the night, Jonathan leaves his room. He's looking around when he notices a light behind a door, so he goes through and finds some creepy stairs that take him to a fancy basement. In the middle of the room he sees a coffin, and when he opens it, he discovers Dracula sleeping. The Count tells him he shouldn't have left the room, and Jonathan is suddenly knocked out by a gargoyle. When he wakes up, Jonathan finds himself being chained up by the gargoyles. They hang him upside down and Dracula slashes his neck to make blood drip into a bowl. When Jonathan wonders how God could create such a creature, Dracula laughs in a very disturbing way and asks for his last wish. Jonathan wants to know Dracula's story, and the Count finds the idea so amusing that he makes the gargoyles put him down. Dracula shares what happened while remembering Elisabetta's funeral. He explains that he spent all these centuries waiting for her because he knows that pure souls can reincarnate. The search for her hasn't been easy. For example, during the Black Plague, half of the female population died and the other half was gathering in holy places where he wasn't welcome. He became so lonely that he started to envy humans for being able to die. One day Dracula fell asleep on Elisabetta's grave. The next morning, he woke up with such despair that he went to the nearest window and tried to self-delete. However, he survived the fall. Dracula kept on trying over and over, but no matter how many times he fell, he always survived. Since he couldn't search the entire world for Elisabetta, Dracula decided he needed a plan to draw her to him. For over a century, he developed a fragrance using the most beautiful and magical flowers from the most famous gardens. Eventually he tested the perfume in Italy, where the women immediately started to follow him around. The fragrance was so powerful that Dracula could go to parties and make everyone dance in perfect synchronization under his control. One day in Versailles, Dracula thought he had finally found Elisabetta, but the woman he approached wasn't his wife. The mistake made him cry and realize that he's been jumping from party to party filled with alcohol and debauchery, but not actual love. He decided to stop searching and make others do it for him. In the middle of the party, Dracula started to bite all the women in the room to make them vampires, including Maria. Afterward, Dracula returned to Elisabetta's grave and opened it. He punched the coffin to break it and discovered that only Elisabetta's ashes were left. The sight made him have a breakdown, and he decided to never leave the castle again. The gargoyles would bring him riches and act as his servants while his vampires would continue the search. In the present, Jonathan tells Dracula that he can understand such a strong love because he's engaged. His locket has a picture of his fiancée Mina, so Dracula takes a look and is overtaken by emotion when he realizes that this woman is his wife's reincarnation. Dracula then decides to let Jonathan live to thank him for reuniting him with his love. He calls all his gargoyles and tells them to bring him lots of blood because he needs to be beautiful before meeting with Elisabetta. In Paris, the priest shows Dumont the portrait he found, saying they need to locate a woman who looks like that to capture Dracula. The priest reads a passage from a book that explains God can refuse to give death in cases of blasphemy. However, God can also forgive the offender in the case of true repentance, which would lift the curse. This means that if they kill Dracula, all the vampires he created will become human again. At that moment, Simon enters the office and notices the portrait, pointing out that there's a woman who looks just like that in the visitors area. Dumont and the priest rush into the other room and meet Mina, who explains she's a close friend of Maria's. They met a few days ago at a party, and since then Maria wouldn't leave her side. Maria was always very nice until the wedding, when she lost her mind at the sight of the bishop. Mina admits she has doubts about her own wedding because she feels like she doesn't belong in this time. At the abbey, Dracula appears disguised as a homeless man and the nuns agree to shelter him. However, he drops his disguise as soon as he enters the chapel and sprays his perfume on a figure of Jesus, causing all the nuns in the abbey to rush to the chapel. They fall to their knees as they're overwhelmed by desire, and soon they're forming a pile around Dracula to desperately seek his attention. Without hesitation, Dracula starts feeding on them. At the castle, Jonathan waits until he's alone to throw a blanket at some tools to bring them closer and break his chains. When a gargoyle comes in, it finds Jonathan climbing out the window. It immediately cuts the blanket to cut his support, but Jonathan manages to hold on to the wall. The gargoyles then start trying to reach him through some holes to no avail, so one of them hits him with a hook to make him fall. Jonathan rolls on the snow and his body stops on top of a frozen lake. When a gargoyle tries to follow him, the ice breaks and it drowns, so the others don't know how to reach him. Noticing this, Jonathan starts walking away without fear. Sometime later, Dracula arrives at the psychiatric clinic looking younger and healthier. He uses his perfume to control Simon and makes him guide him to Maria's room. Maria tells Dracula she's found Elisabetta and he rewards her by letting her feed on Simon. In the morning, the priest is doing some research and finds a picture of Vlad. Later he's called to the clinic and Dumont tells him that Maria has disappeared. Simon has become a vampire and has been tied to a bed. The priest notices Simon's fangs and a very strong perfume on his clothes. When Dumont shares the description of the intruder who took Maria, the priest realizes Mina is in danger. At the boarding house, Mina opens the door when she hears knocking and is shocked to find a healthy-looking Maria, who tells her that Dumont discharged her. Maria explains she has a friend who is eager to meet Mina and makes her change into nicer clothes. The women then go to a hotel where Dracula is waiting. Seeing the face of his wife again makes him cry. After showering Mina with compliments, Dracula kisses her hand, causing her to have a vision of them together. Feeling rather uncomfortable, Mina pulls her hand back and leaves with Maria to have fun at the festival. Dracula follows them around as the women enjoy food, drinks, games, a show about a fake mermaid, and cute animals. When they enter a haunted house, the women accidentally split and Mina gets lost. She screams when she's startled by a fake skeleton and Dracula immediately appears by her side to guide her out. At the shooting booth, Dracula teaches her how to shoot and in his embrace, Mina has another vision of the past. Afterward Dracula invites them to rest in his hotel room while they wait for the fireworks show. Mina and Dracula chat for a while and he shows her the little music box. When he plays the song, Mina finds it familiar and starts having visions of being Elisabetta. She immediately pulls back and accuses Dracula of putting a spell on her. Dracula tries to tell her story of Elisabetta and his hopes for her reincarnating, but she insists she's just Mina. He finishes their talk by gifting her the music box. Then Maria drags Mina to watch the fireworks show. At the end of the night, Dracula walks Mina home, leaving her with a big smile. But her happiness is replaced by shock when she finds the priest and Dumont taking care of a sick Jonathan in the living room. The priest tells her what happened to her fiancé, but Mina refuses to believe that Dracula could be cruel, so the priest has to explain that Dracula is a vampire who feasts on human blood and uses perfume to control his victims. He checks her neck and is relieved to see no bite marks. Mina rushes to her room to cry in private and ends up opening the music box. She keeps having visions of Elisabetta and only snaps out of it when Dracula appears beside her. Mina asks him to leave, so Dracula tries to climb out the window. Not knowing his powers, she thinks he's about to self-delete and makes him stop. Then she starts accusing him of tricking her, so Dracula assures her that he's never used the perfume on her and throws the bottle into the fire. Next she mentions the blood-sucking, which Dracula admits he does but promises she'll never be his victim. Mina's nose starts bleeding, so Dracula picks the blood with his fingers and licks it off. Then he takes her hand and says romantic things to her while the visions return. Hearing the last words he spoke to Elisabetta, Mina finally accepts the memories as hers and calls Dracula her love before kissing him. They end up getting dirty and Mina asks for immortality too, so Dracula bites her to transform her. At that moment the priest smells the same perfume he detected in the hospital and realizes that Dracula is in the house. He takes a gun and rushes to Mina's bedroom, only to find it empty. The priest and Dumont think Dracula must have taken Mina back to his castle and Jonathan agrees to take them there. Meanwhile Maria reunites with Henry. She's very affectionate with him as a way to keep him distracted. When she's about to bite him, the priest's group interrupts her. Maria furiously roars and gets ready to attack, so the priest shoots her down. However, Maria quickly recovers and strikes Henry down before capturing the priest to try to kill him. Jonathan finds a sword on the wall and immediately uses it to decapitate Maria. Her head flies off and knocks Dumont down while her body chokes the priest a little longer before collapsing. Since it's still shaking, the priest takes a crucifix and stabs Maria's heart to kill her for good. In Romania, a group of servants leaves a coffin inside the castle. Dracula and Mina come out of it and he gives her a tour of the castle. After meeting the gargoyles, Mina plays the music from the box and puts on Elisabetta's dress. At the castle gate, the priest's team has arrived with some soldiers. They wait for the servants to leave and rush in to keep the gate open so they can get inside. A soldier shoots at the front door while men near the forest open fire with cannons, causing many parts of the castle to crumble. Dracula tells Mina to stay in the room while he goes out to fight, but Mina is terrified because the cannonballs are destroying her ceiling. The gargoyles go down to fight the soldiers, bringing them down one after the other. However, the army greatly outnumbers them, so it's not hard for the humans to keep advancing and take over the castle. Jonathan guides his friends to the basement room while soldiers search the upper floors. Mina sees them coming and locks her door. In the basement, soldiers open fire at the coffin. Unfortunately, Dracula appears behind Jonathan and knocks him out while calling him ungrateful. Then he starts fighting the soldiers with a sword, quickly moving among them with precise strikes to bring them down one by one. Soon more soldiers arrive, but Dracula kills them quickly too. Henry uses this distraction to shoot Dracula with two guns at the same time, but it does nothing. Dracula jumps on him and bites his neck. With a flick of his hand, Dracula closes the door to stop more soldiers from coming and holds the priest at sword point. The priest tells Dracula that God never wanted him to kill for him because God doesn't want his creation to be destroyed. When people kill, they do it for themselves. When the priest says he was sent by God to save Dracula, the Count points out that his only salvation is Mina. However, the priest says Dracula will be her damnation. Hearing Mina yelling in her room, Dracula rushes to help her and asks his gargoyles to buy him time. While the gargoyles fight the men in the hall, Dracula kills all the soldiers in the corridor. Once they're all down, he bursts into the room to reunite with Mina in a hug. The priest tries to follow him, so Dracula closes the door. However, the priest reminds him that if he truly loves his wife, he must do the right thing. Ignoring Mina's pleas, Dracula leaves the room and locks Mina inside. He rests against the door and the priest prays to his god while impaling Dracula's heart with a stake to kill him. Afterward, Mina drags him into the room so they can share final words of love before Dracula turns to ash. All the lights in the castle go out and the gargoyles become human children. Jonathan comes looking for Mina and finds her crying over the ashes, which are now flying away. Realizing that he's lost her love, Jonathan walks off. Outside the castle, Dracula's ashes spread in the wind. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like this. Thanks for watching.